Hey there, my fellow music nerds. That's right. Today's video is another episode of LinX, a musical investigation, the show where we delve into two disparate musical cultures and look into some of their musical similarities that show us that maybe we're not all that different. In today's episode, we will be looking at romantic virtuoso pieces for piano and traditional solo Vietnamese music for Tranh. Let's get into it. The Romantic Era, a time period between the early 1800s to the start of the 20th century, was filled with many names you may all be familiar with: Dvorak, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Chopin, and so many more. Among these amazing composers was Liszt, well known for his virtuosic piano pieces which pushed the boundaries of piano playing. Fun fact, he was also known to be a bit of a ladies' man, so if any of you out there are looking for some company, make like Liszt and get to playing piano. Liszt's music is known for its high technical precision and difficulty, thick textures through use of extensive arpeggiated accompaniments, and their beautiful melodic passages, many of which are easily recognizable these days. Romantic piano music saw many developments in style and tonality, such as less rigid musical structure, more use of pedaling, and influences from all around the world. For this episode of LinX, we will be taking a look at Liszt's composition for solo piano Un sospiro, meaning a sigh in Italian, the last of Liszt's 3 concert etudes, composed 1845 to 1849. Let's take a peek at our other chosen piece. For this piece, we've got to go all the way to the other side of the world, to Vietnam, a country rich in music and influences from hundreds of different ethnic groups. The focus of today's episode, however, is traditional Vietnamese music for a solo instrument, much like Liszt's piano piece, though I'm not sure you'll have heard of this instrument before. The Dan Tran is the Vietnamese zither, much like the Chinese guzheng or the Japanese koto. It is a plucked instrument with strings tuned to a pentatonic scale, unlike the Western heptatonic scale you'll likely be familiar with. It consists of a sound box with bridges, tuning pegs, and steel strings which resonate to produce the sound. Due to the nature of the instrument and the 17 or sometimes 16 strings, music played on the Dan Tran tends to lack its own accompaniment, meaning that it only plays one line of music as opposed to the piano's 2. Let's take a look at the piece we're breaking down today. This is a traditional Vietnamese song called Cong Min Toa Lao, transcribed for solo Dan Tran. Let's dive into the theory. We can group our musical lengths into 2 main categories, melody and texture. Under melody, we have tonality, contour, and structure. Let's start there. Take a listen to a little bit of both pieces and see if you can hear any similarities. Here's Cong Min Toa Lao. And here's Un sospiro. They sound completely different, don't they? Despite the obvious differences, there are some discrete similarities hidden right in there. Firstly, their tonality. The Dan Tran, as we learned before, is tuned to a pentatonic modal scale, meaning there's only 5 different notes in a scale and on the instrument, albeit at different pitches. The piece itself is in D major, meaning that these notes are D, E, F sharp, A, and B. There is no C sharp or G as there would be in a heptatonic scale. There are no notes outside of the scale in this piece, and the melody itself goes like this. Now the list. Despite being written with the traditional Western tonality of a heptatonic scale indicating 7 notes, for example C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, the melody itself has pentatonic elements. Un sospiro is in D flat major, so the notes in its scale are D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, and C. Despite this, the main melody, for the sake of simplicity, let's just refer to it as motif X, is pentatonic, seeing as it doesn't include notes 4 or 7 in the heptatonic scale. The accompaniment, however, isn't pentatonic. As we can see, it's a G flat major arpeggio in second inversion, meaning it includes a G flat. But we're just looking at the melody of these two pieces. Interestingly, if we put the pieces in the same key, let's say D major, they have the same notes, D, F sharp, A, and B, just in a different order. That brings us to our second point about the melody, contour. Let's take a look at the melody of Kong Min Toa Lao. Since it is being played in octaves, we can reduce it to a single line of music. There is a distinctive shape in the melody, a perfect falling and rising scale. It descends 3 notes, rises another 3, and then falls down a third, although I believe that that last note is only really necessary to set up the next part of the melody, as it acts as a sort of linking note to the next sequence, but more on that later. The main part of the melody creates a sort of upside down bell-shaped arc, right? And it appears 3 times with a quick glissando to break them each apart. Let's do the same with the list. Another shape emerges. It's a D-flat pentatonic scale, only this time it rises 4, falls 1, jumps down a third, and then rises 1 to D flat. The piece is in D flat major, as we already know, and the melody here is essentially a rising and falling pentatonic scale that has been shuffled a bit towards the end. What we see here is basically the inversion of the shape we saw previously with Kong Min Toa Lao. It's a bell shape. The only difference here is that the last 2 notes are switched around. The reasoning for this is that since the piece is in D flat major, it makes harmonic sense to cadence in D flat major. However, you could also argue that since the melody starts on an A flat, which is pretty closely related to D flat major as its dominant, and it functions as a rising and falling scale, it would also make sense for the melody to end back to where it started on the A flat, because it creates a sense of balance and doesn't divert from the tonic key. The piece stays in the key of D flat major, as established through the perfect cadence in D flat major and the arpeggiated accompaniment. The thing is, and this is a bit confusing, so please bear with me, this already happens. We can get a sense of resolution in the tonic without the melody strictly ending on a D flat, or even an A flat. The left hand's accompaniment plays an arpeggiated D flat major, and happens to also play an A flat 4, which sort of brings the melody back to where it started, and keeps it grounded in the tonic. It may not strictly be written as part of the melody, but we hear it regardless. Switching the order of the last 2 notes was therefore highly likely to be a stylistic choice by Liszt, because it would sound right either way. Take a listen. Here is the melody as it was written. And here's the melody if the last two notes, D flat and B flat, were swapped. The bottom line is that this motif X, in its most basic form, has a symmetrical bell-shaped curve, just like Kong Min Toa Lao, showing that both melodies have a sense of symmetry or balance in their shape. Now let's take a look at our last point about the melody. Both pieces have a similar structure in that they essentially have a main motif that plays twice and then changes on the third repeat. Kong Min Toa Lao's melody is a sequence, a restatement of a melodic passage at a higher or lower pitch. In this case, it's lower. This section is our melodic passage, right? A bell-shaped arc, a falling third, and a glissando. This is restated once, exactly the same shape, just down a third, and then down another again, but it's longer than the first two, and it changes slightly. A variation. Instead of repeating the same shape as before and ending the A section with the same glissando, it continues after the first bell shape and the falling third, and eventually ends on a rising arpeggio, which is similar to the glissando from before in that they have the same notes. Remember, this is on a pentatonic scale, but not the same shape or fluidity between notes, which is a key characteristic of the glissando. As mentioned before, the last note before the glissandi in every restatement of the melody acts as a linking note to the consequent sequence. An A precedes a B, and an F sharp precedes an A. Remember, there is no G in this scale. These linking notes could also be attributed to creating a more coherent transition between the melodic segments, which is why I did not count it as an essential part of the principal melody. Un Sospiro does pretty much the same thing. It plays our previously dubbed motif X twice, and then changes slightly more on the last repeat. We can call this motif Y. The main difference here, however, is that it breaks out of the previously maintained pentatonic scale, as it includes a resounding G flat, G natural, and a C. But seeing as it is fairly closely related to motif X in terms of rhythm, tonality, and style, I think it's safe to categorize it as a variation of motif X. Bonus point. I decided that the melodies were so similar you could mash them up and it would sound great. Wait till the end credits to hear my very own mashup of the two pieces. Alright, so that's the first pillar of our argument done. Let's take a look at the second, texture, or in other words, how layers of sound interact in a piece of music. We'll start with glissandi. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a glissando as a rapid sliding up or down the musical scale. Our Vietnamese piece shows just this in several places in the music. Take a listen. Now take a listen to the romantic piece, here in bar 37. Although, technically, one cannot slide up or down a chromatic scale on the piano, as one would with, for example, a string instrument, the effect of this glissando-like section can be created with the sheer speed and ferocity at which the scale is being played. Alright, so now that we know that they share the presence of glissandi, or glissando-like textures, how about octaves? Sections of music played in octaves are generally a way of reinforcing that specific line of music. It makes it more sonorous or more powerful than a single line of music. In these examples, you can see that not only can you play octaves straight, that is vertically, but one can also break them up and play them as two lines of music almost imitating one another. Look here. Interestingly, whilst Kong Min Toa Lao starts off with straight octaves and then delves into broken octaves in its B section, Un Sospiro demonstrated the opposite, as it has broken octaves in its opening passage, which then become straight ones, showing once again another element of balance within both pieces. Alright, final element, sound production. We learned earlier that the Dan Tran is an instrument that is played by plucking strings, much like a harp, or playing pizzicato on bowed-string instruments like cellos. Well, this sound production is very similar to that of the piano, where a small hammer strikes the strings which then vibrate to produce a sound. In a way, both are very similar instruments in terms of function. The main difference in sound production is that the vibration of the string in the Dan Tran, if not dampened by the player by stopping the vibration with their hand, gradually decays over a longer period of time than that of the piano, where the sound is dampened almost immediately after the note is released. However, the piano also has an interesting element called the sustain pedal, which does exactly as it says, it sustains the sound. Choosing to dampen and blend this sound is a stylistic choice, which became increasingly present in romantic piano music, and resembles that of the Dan Tran. Even though the instrumentation is technically different, the pieces both have similar qualities in timbre, which contributes to creating a similar texture. So there you have it. Romantic virtuoso pieces for piano and traditional Vietnamese solo Dan Tran music are not all that different. They share similarities in the tonality, contour, and structure of their melodies, as well as the textures created through sound production and stylistic choices in performance. I hope you'll join us next time, where we'll take a look at 90s hip-hop and Harawi, a traditional genre of Andean music. It's a goodbye from me.